With everything that's gone on in the video game industry in 2024, one company that has managed to, relatively speaking, stay out of the headlines, at least for negative reasons, has been Nintendo. They've been mostly focused on releasing quality games, setting up the short-term future of the twilight of what could eventually end up being their most successful system in the Switch, and also teasing the successor console, and relatively speaking, catering to the fans' wants. It's nothing. You couldn't want anything else from the company. They've been doing exceptionally well, and that's not even having to grade on a curve in comparison to the rest of the competitors in the industry. Like, if you square them up to Sony and Microsoft, like, Nintendo gets an A+ on the year. But if you've also been tracking the industry, if you've been a gamer for long enough, you'll also know that Nintendo, they will go ahead and they will ingratiate themselves to the fans, build up all of this goodwill, and then do something completely and totally stupid, seemingly out of nowhere. And this is what we have right here, because long after the hype and the hysteria has faded on Palworld, you remember, right? Like, in February, this was the game, 2.1 million concurrent players. Now, generally speaking, 30,000 people, 35,000 people check in on the weekends, but outside of that, man, it's maintaining a nice, steady little player base, probably until the next big update comes around. It ends up leaving early access, but getting back to that 7-digit level doesn't really seem like it's going to be happening anytime soon, so now the Big N decides to marshal their forces and strike against the little company that could. And I'm just wondering, and it's like, okay, cool. And especially when all of this stuff was popping off in February as well. Like, people were looking at some of the character designs going, well, that's awfully close to certain things, but it's distinct enough, right? Like, you want to take a look at some sheep, and it's like, does the Pokemon company really own the intellectual property? Do they own the license? Farm animals? Yeah, not really. Okay, can you actually market a cloud? Yeah, I don't think so either. So you can probably skate on a couple of things, and for all of the threats and the pseudo nonsense that was permeating this sphere, it kind of seemed like Nintendo was going to let cooler heads prevail, and Palworld was just going to allow to exist, and I don't know, maybe spurn on some creativity, because for as successful as Nintendo has been with a majority of their IPs during the reign of the Switch, every single IP that is released, major title on the console, it has gone on to be the best-selling, and in some cases, depends on your metric, the most highly regarded iteration from said franchise, except for one, and that's Pokemon. They've kind of been in a holding pattern for a very long time. You look at the gameplay, and outside of a couple of the visual aspects, hasn't really iterated and hasn't really innovated all that much. And whenever they try to make iterations and innovations, well, frankly, it ends up falling flat on its face. And it's a franchise that, hey, I resonated with quite a bit. Like when, the games first came around, when the trading card game was out, when the anime was first coming out, that was right in my wheelhouse when it comes to childhood. Late 90s, early 2000s, being born 1990, that's my jam right there. And yeah, I played the hell through Gen 1. Gen 2, I fell off in Gen 3, and then for whatever reason, I came back around during X and Y. What's that? Is that the 6th or is that the 7th generation? I'm not too sure. X and Y, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, the remakes of 3. Or Gen 3. I thought those were pretty good. I thought they were pretty decent. I like the Mega Evolution gimmick. That was pretty fun, but after that, I just fell off because Sun and Moon just looked like absolute trash, and that's when things, started to really fall off. But hey, we're finally going 3D. Great. It's just your gameplay kind of got left back in the early 90s, because here's the thing, like, this was all built on turn-based strategy, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love me a good turn-based RPG. But intrinsically, that's what Pokemon is. But when you continue to build on that already osteoporosis riddled skeleton, there's only so much that you can slap on it before it all starts to crumble, and a lot of people point to Sun and Moon as kind of the point, and maybe you could go to X and Y. Things really started to fall apart. I think that's when you ended up getting the Gigantiforms or I don't know, crap, man. Then especially when you finally had the opportunity, Pokemon was finally coming to a home console for the first time ever with a proper full release, and oh boy, those games suck. And so maybe that's why Nintendo has taken this specific perceived slight so seriously. because they have so many other W's that are out there. It's just the one IP, the most prolific franchise under their banner, which, let's not get it twisted, okay? Pokemon is the best-selling franchise in gaming history. I think maybe Tetris has outsold it, but all things considered, yeah, it's Pokemon by like a wide margin. And so because their recent releases have been getting dunked on, perhaps they're going to try to be a little bit more protective over this, which leads to this, well, 9-month late lawsuit, I guess, because all this is going to do is push more people into the corner of Palworld and potentially revive it a little bit. Okay, but let's check in. Well, like, what are they suing over? What are their grievances being brought to court? Nintendo and the Pokemon Company officially filed patent infringement lawsuit against Palworld, the developer Pocketpair, in a move that players knew was likely coming, but hoped it never would. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company have officially filed a suit against Pocketpair Incorporated and their popular monster collecting game Palworld on the grounds of alleged patent infringement. Okay, which patents are we talking about there? For beetles? Okay, you think he looks a little bit too close to Pinsir? I don't really know about that, but okay. Officially filed in the Tokyo District Court on September 18th and announced the next same day. That's a strange way to structure that sentence. Via a joint press release issued by the Pokemon IP co-owners, the lawsuit seeks an injunction against infringement and compensation for damages on the grounds that Palworld, a game developed and released by the defendant, infringes multiple patent rights. Nintendo will continue to take necessary actions against any infringements of its intellectual property rights, including the Nintendo brand itself. To protect the intellectual properties it has worked hard to establish over the years, the press release concluded. And yeah, if you want to go ahead and take a look at said press release, I have it pulled up right here, and that's basically the gist of it, right? To whom it may concern, here's the lawsuit. We're going after Pocketpair for damages because they've apparently infringed on some of our copyrights. And which ones exactly are they trying to say are infringements? Well, Palworld responds to the lawsuit. Nintendo patents throwing things. I beg your pardon? Nintendo just received the patent on throwing things at enemies, particularly items that contain pets. What are we talking about? Well, to just go ahead and jump back a little bit, this kind of ties in and makes the timing on this lawsuit potentially make a little bit more sense. The Pokemon Company wins historic $15 million copyright lawsuit against the Chinese clone. Oh, those damn Chinese messing it all up for all of us. Pokemon Company won a major legal battle against several Chinese firms over copyright and intellectual property theft. Court ruling handed down that Shenzhen Intermediate People's Court ordered one company pay more than $15 million in damages for creating a game that infringed on the Pokemon Company's iconic characters and trademarks. It's funny, right? Like, they're going to be super litigious when it comes to perceived infringements when, yeah, they obviously have, Power Rangers ripoffs, and as somebody else has, also pointed out here, those original 151, man, they look awfully similar to something that, Dragon Quest was doing about a decade prior. I mean, there's a little bit more of a distinction, but, you can just go ahead and take a look there and see a lot of inspiration. I would be able to say that both of those are obviously distinct, but hey, if we're going to that levels and you want to be that petty, you got to be able to take about as good as you can give. Flip reverse that. Give about as good as you can take. The Pokemon clone. The case centers around a turn-based RPG titled Pocket Monster Reissue. Well, it's really tough to beat the rap when you're literally naming yourself, the long form of Pokemon. According to the lawsuit, it reportedly copied key elements of the original Pokemon franchise. Not only were the characters like Ash Ketchum and Pikachu allegedly lifted directly from the Pokemon games, but the overall game design closely mirrored the mechanics. And here's where the important part comes in. Via GameBiz, a Japanese news website, the court found that the game developers knowingly violated the Pokemon Company's copyright. Which one's that? So it wasn't a minor case. It seems a Pocket Monster Reissue is estimated to have generated a staggering $42 million annually. Despite this, the Pokemon Company originally sued for $72 million and only got rewarded $15. That's kind of interesting. The company also demanded a public apology from the defendants to acknowledge the widespread damage to their intellectual property. 6 companies involved in the lawsuit were ordered to bear joint liability, although some are reportedly planning to appeal the ruling. So, In a statement, the Pokemon Company emphasized that it will continue to aggressively defend its intellectual property rights, okay, and the company's efforts are in line with other industry leaders who are increasingly taking legal action to combat knockoff games. And yeah, if that game explicitly lifted Ash, Ketchum, and Pikachu, well, that's one thing. But if they're trying to parlay this W into one against Pocketpair because, I don't know, man, they have PAL spheres, I think that's what they're called. Yeah, PAL spheres, and think that they own the IP on throwing things, as Grums points out. Software patents are evil. Gameplay patents stifle innovation. It's kind of like how, okay, think of them for whatever you will, but the Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor games, some of the better Lord of the Rings games, Middle-earth set games, that whole Nemesis system, I think it's called the Nemesis system, right? Because that's why a lot of people play it. It's definitely not for the story, because there's nothing more authentically Tolkien than making Isildur one of the 9 ring wraiths. Nothing could possibly be more faithful or Tolkienian than that. But I digress. Some of the mechanics behind that, how you can be slain by the boss of one of the trash mob orcs, and he ends up getting a backstory and then rises through the ranks and ends up, if he kills you in combat, he gets accolades and accomplishments, and if you eventually do end up killing him, you get more of a reward for that. That's pretty cool. But the developers patented that gameplay style, therefore nobody else is allowed to use it unless they license it from them. I don't have a problem with anybody licensing their IP. Of course, that's totally above board. I just find it interesting where they're trademarking game mechanics for a game that is based on an adaptation of an IP. That's a little bit strange, and that's what Nintendo and that's what Pokemon is apparently doing here with the Pokeball mechanic. Because here's the patent application, the abstract in the first mode, the aiming direction of the virtual space is determined based on the second operation input, and a player character is caused the launch aiming direction in the item that affects the field character disposed on a field in the virtual space based on the third operation input. In the second mode, it's the technical term of throwing a Pokeball, okay? And that's what they've ended up patenting, and then they ended up winning that lawsuit against the Chinese ripoff company, in part based on that application. And here's the response from Palworld regarding the lawsuit. Yesterday, a lawsuit was filed against our company for patent infringement. We have received notice from this lawsuit and will begin the appropriate legal proceedings and investigations into the claims of patent infringement. At this moment, we are unaware of any specific patents we are accused of infringing upon, and we have not been notified of such details. Pocketpair is a small indie game company based in Tokyo. Our goal as a company has always been to create fun games, which they definitely have, man. Like 2.1 million people for a sustained amount of time, and even still, 9 months after the fact, 30,000 people on a consistent basis checking it out. You did something right, okay? Like, your diminished numbers right now are still head and shoulders above a lot of your AAA competitors, okay? Palworld was a surprise success this year for both gamers and for us. We are blown away by the amazing response to their game, and have been working hard to make it even better for our fans. We will continue improving Palworld and strive to create a game that our fans can be proud of. It is truly unfortunate that we will be forced to allocate significant time to matters unrelated to game development due to this lawsuit. However, we will do our utmost for our fans to ensure that indie game developers are not hindered or discouraged from pursuing their creative ideas. We apologize to our fans and supporters for any worry or discomfort that this news has caused. As always, thank you for your continued support of Palworld and Pocketpair. That's a great statement, okay? Saying, we're going to try our best to not have this negatively affect our fan base, because that's actually all we care about. They're not out there, deriding anybody that doesn't deserve derision. And yeah, they're like, yeah, we anticipated, some people lashing out, but normally, I remember, and you guys probably do as well, it's like, maybe it was going to be over some of the designs. But the fact that they're going to be sued, they've had legal action taken against them, and they haven't been informed as to what specifically dealing with right here, outside of speculation that, yeah, maybe it's over Pokeball mechanics. It's going to be interesting, and I'm just going to wonder. Now, this is ultimately going to work out for both parties. Is Nintendo and Pokemon going to see a negative hit to it? potentially even more so than it's already gotten? Yeah, I don't really know. That's going to be tough to tell. And if Palworld is going to see a little bit of a resurgence and people wanting to get on board and support what they're doing, because frankly, they've done Pokemon better than the Pokemon Company has been able to do it for the past 10 years at least. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.